The League of Women Voters is a national nonpartisan organization formed to encourage citizen participation in government. It never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. The statements and opinions of the candidates are presented solely in the interests of public service and in no way are to be construed as an endorsement thereof by the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters takes no responsibility for any of the views or facts stated by the candidates.
Welcome to the Candidate Forum. My name is Kim Russell. I am a resident of Rochester and a business owner of 33 years. I sat on City Council for the term of 2007 through 2019. Today, the League of Women Voters will introduce you to two candidates vying for the at-large seats in Rochester Hills. The general election is going to be November 2nd, is a 4-year term, and the salary is $6,577. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization encouraging the information and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy and influences public policy through education and advocacy. It is the League's intention that following this introduction of the candidates, you will be informed and able to cast a reasonable and responsible vote. Local government plays a very important part in our individual lives, for residents and for business. So now I would like to introduce the two candidates we have. Matthew Berard, that goes by Matt. He grew up here in Rochester Hills, graduated from Rochester High School, is now a lawyer and practices at Lohman and Brock. Is that correct?
Bowman and Brook, but that was pretty close.
Bowman and Brook, okay. Well, I was close.
You were good, yeah, thank you.
And I'll let him introduce himself in a minute. And then we also have David Walker. David Walker was appointed by City Council for a vacancy, and he is now up for election. He is a big participant of the Rochester Chamber, and we will listen to him in just a few minutes. But Matt, let's get started with you. Introduce yourself just maybe for a minute or so.
Sure, well, thank you, Kim. Thank you so much for doing this. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting on this candidate forum. Unfortunately, with COVID, the Zoom format isn't ideal. I would really like to see everybody in person at City Hall. But again, thank you so much for doing this and taking the time to do it. It's very important. Like Kim said, my name is Matt Berard. I am a 24-year total resident of the city of Rochester Hills. I grew up here. I went to school here. I'm a proud graduate of Meadowbrook Elementary, West Middle School, Rochester High School, and even Oakland University before I attended the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law. And as Kim mentioned, I am a practicing lawyer at the firm of Bowman and Brook in Bloomfield Hills, where I represent product manufacturers, where I defend the design and manufacture of products, many of which are designed by our neighbors here in Rochester Hills and Metro Detroit. So I am running for City Council because, again, I have great memories of my time growing up here in Rochester Hills. And now that I'm raising my own family here with 2 sons, I care deeply about the future of Rochester Hills and want to make sure it remains a great place to live for generations to come. So again, thank you very much, Kim, for the opportunity to introduce myself. And I look forward to talking about the issues.
All right, thank you, Matt. David?
Thank you, Kim. My name is David Walker. As Kim mentioned, I appreciate this, you doing this for us today, and thank the League of Women Voters for holding this forum and educating the residents on the upcoming election. As we mentioned, my name is David Walker. I've been a resident of Rochester Hills for 34 years, been married for 36 years. I live here, I work here, I've raised my family here. I'm a real estate agent with Brookview Realty, located in downtown Rochester. We share the building with La Pumas, Coney Island. Tony's our landlord. And I have been on city council, just a point of clarification, appointed in 2018 to fill the vacant seat, and then ran for re-election in 2019. So I was elected in 2019 to serve the remainder of the term, so through 2021. And now I am looking to serve an additional 4 years for the residents. So I said I've served for 3 years, but I've been preparing myself for the last 15 years, as you know, through my volunteer contribution to this community through various roles over that time. I have a real good understanding of the community and a real good commitment to that community. And from a residential real estate perspective, you think about what I do every day. I deal with the residents. I know what they like and they dislike about this community. And I also have the opportunity to drive through almost every neighborhood, looking at the streets and the roads and getting a real good firsthand perspective of the infrastructure as we know it. So from a volunteer role and from a professional business role, I think I'm uniquely qualified. And I cannot think of a higher honor than to serve on city council to represent the residents of this amazing city. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for both of your introductions. I appreciate that. So let's just get started with our questions. So when I viewed your videos on the Oakland County Times, both of you had a big service component, which I really appreciate, and I'm sure the residents appreciate as well. So when we're thinking about service, it's meaning delivering value and tailoring that to the customer. In this kind of arena, we're looking at our residents and our businesses and how to facilitate a positive income, and of course, watching the budget and the pricing of that. So can you give us something tangible that you would think of, Matt, of serving, in the future? And David, maybe what you've done currently and into the future for service of our residents and businesses here in Rochester Hills. David, let's start with you.
Thank you, Kim. And it's all about quality of life. Rochester Hills has such a unique set of amenities, and that's, as you know, where I spend a lot of my time. It started with the Clinton River Watershed Council when I started volunteering there some 15 years ago. The Pink Creek, the Clinton River, those natural resources are valuable and they need to be cherished. So putting your money where your mouth is, getting out there and volunteering and taking on that role is important to me. And I'm one that would put on the waders and get in the river and do the heavy lifting. And then that evolved to my contribution with the Chamber of Commerce. As you know, I've been involved heavily with the Chamber for the last 15 years, and that really represents the business community and how many new businesses that we've been able to welcome. And a healthy economy is really dependent upon a healthy business climate and the balance between residents and business. That's really where I'd spent my time for the last 15 years, welcoming new businesses into the community, volunteering as an ambassador. I served on the board of directors for 8 years. I was the chairman of that board in 2015. That year, we created the Chamber Foundation. And the Chamber Foundation is actually the organization that facilitates the Christmas parade, the Rochester Area Christmas Parade, which is in its 70th year this year. And I have been volunteering for that organization for the last 15 years, another one of those quality of life events that really tens of thousands of people in our community value and look forward to. We also went through leadership. If you know that the Chamber Foundation facilitates the Rochester Area Greater Leadership Program, that 9-month deep dive into our economics, politics, education, healthcare. It's a program that develops future leaders. And that's really where I had my eyes open, so to speak, with all of the amazing people in this community. And that's where those connections started to develop through the chamber, through leadership, through volunteering. And that continued to evolve to the point where I was the right person at the right time to fill that vacancy on city council. Since I've been on city council, we have the opportunity to serve on the OPC governing board. You are intimately aware of what that organization does for our community and what services that provide to a very needed demographic. Also, the Paint Creek Trailways Commission, another one of those passions of mine. I live very near the trail. I'm a user of the trail, and I see the benefit of that, what we call a linear park. and this 5 municipalities that it takes to really oversee that trail, and then all of the people that really take advantage of that trail every year. So that combination, that body of work that I've developed over the last 15 years really uniquely qualifies me for understanding what this community has to offer. And then, like I said, getting involved, doing the heavy lifting to make sure that those cherished amenities continue for years and years to come.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. And thank you for your service. Matt, so I know you've lived in the community and you see with your raising your family here. Let's hear what you think about service and what you can offer.
Sure, absolutely. Well, again, as I mentioned, I grew up here, so I was in the Cub Scouts here at PAC 188 in Rochester Hills. And then I went on to be an Eagle Scout in Troop 360 in Auburn Hills. And obviously for the Boy Scouts, it's a great program which instills in you that sense of volunteerism, and it instills in you that sense of community and to leave things better than you found it. And so I've really used that principle that was ingrained in me from a very young age to try to translate that into what I would be as a city council person. I would want to make sure that the city is left better than when I found it when I got here. And frankly, I think that we do have a problem in this city. We have a problem that it's becoming overdeveloped, that our green spaces are being continuously eroded by the new developments that is going at a blistering pace. And frankly, in the last 2 years, we've seen an explosion of development. In 2019, for instance, a tree removal permits took down 622 trees. In 2020, it exploded to 1,397 trees in 2020. So for the last 2 years, we've taken down 2,019 trees in our city for the sake of development. And again, growing up in the Boy Scouts, I understand nature and conservation, and I want to make sure that we preserve that in the city of Rochester Hills. But it's undeniable that our city is being overdeveloped, and that's what I would bring from my lessons in the Boy Scouts to also bring it on to city council. From there, when I was in high school, I started working full-time when I was about 16 years old at the North Oakland YMCA. Again, instilling in you that sense of community and volunteerism at the YMCA, and coaching a 5th and 6th grade baseball team when I was only like 19 years old. But I was a lifeguard at the YMCA and worked there for many years, 5 years before I went to Oakland County. And I started my legal career when I was 18. So I had a lot of overlap on the job front here. I was actually having 3 jobs at one time. But at 18, I started working for the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office. And obviously that's a big commitment to public service. And then I continued to work for the county by clerking for a judge for nearly 5 years as I put myself through undergrad at Oakland University, and then attended Detroit Mercy Law School at night. So you can imagine what that day was like, where you're working for Oakland County in Pontiac, and then you got to drive all the way down to Detroit and then do it all over each day for about 3.5 years. So through those experiences, and then even after my work career too, for public service at Oakland County, but after my work career and as I become a lawyer, I'm still volunteering for legal bar associations, for instance, helping with pro bono projects, representing people on expungement cases, trying to give back to the community in that way, as well as be involved in those voluntary bar associations, as well as what I'm particularly proud of is being involved in Operation Good Cheer, which is a fantastic volunteer experience where it's basically taking lists of foster children from across the state of Michigan and purchasing gifts and then shipping them out to the kids all across the state. And the thing I really like about Operation Good Cheer is that it's very aviation driven. So I'm actually a pilot. And so it's very fun to be able to get the gifts together, bring them all into an airplane hangar at Oakland County Airport, and then see them shipped out. I swear it's like the closest thing you'll ever see to a real life Santa's workshop. It is the coolest thing ever. But that's what I'm really proud of, is being involved in Operation Good Cheer for about the last 6 or 7 years. And through those experiences, again, I continue to want to give back to the community, but it translates into a city council position because you realize that you have to leave the city better than you found it. And that's really the guiding principle that I'm going to have, is to make sure that the city is a great place to live, even for my kids when they grow up here. And maybe they'll do the same thing that I did. they'll go to Rochester schools and they'll want to come back and raise their family in Rochester Hills. But if we continue to develop every square inch of the city, then we're going to lose what is unique about Rochester Hills. And we need to make sure we are preserving that while still acknowledging that the business community is important, but we really need to slow down our erosion of our green spaces that we've seen over the years.
Well, thank you, Matt, and thank you for the plug for Scouts. I know our past mayor, Rob Ray, was Eagle Scout as well. So that's an important program for our young boys and girls. So thank you for that. So as we talk, so Rochester Hills is the city of trees, and the mayor really has invested a lot of time in Innovation Park. We know that because that was his last mayor address was there. So I know that it's important to have green space. And when we talk about green space, there's one of the big questions is the deer population. So that's one of the questions from a couple of residents in your community in Rochester Hills. Is we know that the deer population, and it's been a big topic, and it's just something that is just really, difficult to conquer. But I'd just like to hear a little bit about what you think, what we should do about the deer population. The deer are a carrier of Lyme disease. And so I know that several of your citizens are concerned about that. So Matt, let's start with you. What is your thought on the deer population in Rochester Hills?
That's a great question, Kim. And again, growing up here, I know this has been an issue. I remember when I was a kid, it was a special thing to see a deer in the backyard. And now I have at least 15 deer going through every single day. And so we do have a problem. I don't think anybody is denying that we have a problem with the deer. I know the mayor admits we have a problem. We have an overpopulation of the deer. And it's a pretty pertinent question too, because just in the last 3 days, we've seen that there's been an outbreak of diseases in the deer, which are causing them to basically drop dead near bodies of water. And so that's the diseases are running through that deer population, which are also in our community. Now, the fact of the matter is that they've done deer population surveys for the last however many years, and there's been nothing to address that deer population. In 2019, for instance, there were 423 deer counted just in 10 parcels alone in Rochester Hills. So that doesn't even encompass the 32.9 square miles of the city. That's just 423 deer on 10 parcels. And then in 2020, there's 361 deer on those same 10 parcels. And so we really need to think about how we're going to address this deer problem. And I've done a lot of research into this as well. Many different municipalities, some local, some out of state, have also had this problem. This is not a Rochester Hills problem. This is not just an Oakland County problem. This is not just a Michigan problem. This is a national issue. And so what we need to do is think about what the best way is to manage that deer population. Because again, I don't think anybody is saying that there isn't an overpopulation of deer. But we have basically three choices. We can do nothing, like we have done. We can do some kind of attempted sterilization of the deer, which is either with a dart or some kind of surgical sterilization of the deer. And then there's the deer cull option. And some studies, one out of Cornell actually, had recommended some kind of blending of all three different approaches. Maybe you don't do something in one area. In residential areas, you try the sterilization. And then in more wooded areas, you try the deer cull. And so what's right for the city of Rochester Hills is really going to depend heavily on what the citizen resident feedback is, on how they want to see it handled. But I do think, and I am supportive of doing something to address it, whether it's sterilization and we see how that goes, or whether we recognize that we have a serious problem and that it's going to cause a safety issue for motorists, for pedestrians, and that we try to address it some other way. And I'm not saying that I'm not aware of the prior attempt to do a deer cull here in Rochester Hills. That was a big issue back more than 10 years ago, I believe. But we're continuing to see those numbers climb. And we can't just sit here and do nothing when coming up in October and November, we're going to see a lot more deer crashes. And it's a safety issue for me because I don't want someone to be killed or hurt because a deer is barreling through their windshield. And so I do think we need to do something, and we need to listen to the experts and tailor a response plan that is right for the city of Rochester Hills and its residents.
Thank you, Matt. So David, it is a big topic, and Matt, you're right. We recognize that it's just not Rochester Hills. It's through our county, it's through our state. It's a big issue. So how are we tackling that at Rochester Hills?
Well, simply put, there is no easy answer to deer management. As you all well know, it is a complex situation, and one that's really not relevant to all areas of Rochester Hills. If you start to drill down into the 32 plus square miles that we navigate, obviously a deer management issue is more prevalent in the northern parts of Rochester Hills than in the southern parts of Rochester Hills, where it might be more densely industrialized or residential. So just to navigate where this problem exists and who it really resonates with, we have to be sensitive to it. It's not all a problem to all residents, but where it is, it's definitely concentrated in the northern suburbs. And there is an issue with, the deer population. I can't say that there isn't, but I'm of the camp that we have gone through several iterations, and you would remember the culling project that we undertook, that the residents were, born against it, polarizing issue. And you have two camps when you look at this deer management issue, and you've got the people that are for the deer and the people that are against the deer. So you can't just simply say, there's an easy answer and it's going to appease all people. Whether it be culling or sterilization, it all, one, costs money, and two, who are we to say that we're going to cull our deer in our community and the ones in Oakland Township aren't going to repopulate? So you look at a wider geographic area, it becomes more diluted to the point where it even becomes a less easy answer. So I guess I would err on the side of, I enjoy the natural setting of Rochester Hills. And part of that natural setting is the wildlife. I live in northern Rochester Hills. I live in a heavily wooded area. We have deer every day, and I enjoy that. I would not look forward to the day where you can look out your window in Rochester Hills and not have the chance of seeing a deer. So I have learned to live with the deer. I don't plant certain things, or I share certain things, or I have become very in tune with what, where, and when. But I would be in the mindset that I love our natural setting, and I don't have anything ill-willed against the deer. I love the deer. I enjoy looking out my window and seeing the deer. And I think that's part of the natural setting that Rochester Hills has to offer. Because if you start to go after the deer, you really want to get particular. And I have got other nuisance animals, like my chipmunks and my squirrels and my bats and my skunks and my beavers. Where do you stop culling? Where are you to make that decision to kill or not to kill? That's my personal opinion. It might not be shared with all the residents, but I enjoy the deer. I love to cohabitate with the deer, and I intend to do so happily for as long as I live here in Rochester Hills. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John.
Can we do another round? Can we do a rebuttal and then a reply on this? Or,
So you can do a rebuttal if you'd like. Sure. We'll make it quick, though. Make it quick.
Yeah, for sure. I understand what Dave's saying, and I appreciate the wildlife too. And I understand that it is part of Rochester Hills to have deer here. But again, this is more of not just a safety issue for me, but this is also an issue about general conservation, because when you have so many deer like this, yeah, they might be nice to look at, but they are eating all of the natural and native species, which are actually pushing out other species of animals and wildlife, like songbirds and other types of smaller species that are now getting pushed out because the deer are, what do they call it, over or heavily browsing the area. So it's not only just a safety issue for me, but it's also a conservation issue of maintaining that wildlife. And interestingly, I think in the last couple months, there was a geese culling that was approved, that was requested by one of the HOAs in the area that was having an issue at one of their ponds. So the city council has already approved the culling of wildlife in Rochester Hills. And so I think we do need to manage the problem. We need to do something, but again, we need that resident feedback to see whether it's sterilization or culling.
All right, thank you, Matt. David, any other thoughts or?
Yeah, and as it relates to deer management, we still have our #1 objective to be public safety. And that's where we have focused. That's where the Deer Management Committee has focused. And that's where we continue to monitor the statistical analysis of are the deer dangerous and are they dangerous to our residents? And that's really where that focus has been, is that the car deer collisions that we go through every October and November. And that's really where we need to continue to focus our efforts on. When it becomes unsafe for our residents because of the deer population, then we need to take action. But we still haven't reached the tipping point at where those numbers lie. So we're still within, the acceptable levels, so to speak. And therefore, I mean, to take drastic action and start to think that we can impact the natural setting of wildlife and start to move that, I fear, the repercussions. If we think that we have the ability to navigate the natural setting of wildlife and how that ecosystem and balance, I am not capable of those decisions. And therefore, I don't know that I would support them. I think my focus would be on the safety of the residents. And if that becomes an issue, that the residents are in jeopardy, then we would take action. We're not there yet.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, for tackling that tough question. So the other question that came in was roads and infrastructure in Rochester Hills. There's a separate millage for that, I believe. David, correct me if I'm wrong. And then the budget. So let's maybe tackle those two together when we're talking about infrastructure. And it's important, it's not glamorous, but it's important for people to, residents and businesses to have good infrastructure, water, sewer, all that good stuff. It's very costly. And we know it's costly, even more during COVID times. We see those prices rising and rising. How are we going to make sure that the infrastructure is needed in the community of Rochester Hills is taken care of, but it's not really impacting the budget in a negative way? So David, let's start with you on that one.
Sure, thank you, Kim. I mean, as far as infrastructure, and you include the roads and the bridges and the water and the sewer systems, I mean, we are an aging city. If you think about the age of our infrastructure, it is coming to the point where their 50 and 60-year-old systems are going to need to be replaced. But I do not know of a more fiscally conservative community that has properly budgeted and planned for those anticipated expenses. We look out 3 years on that rolling budget. We look out 7 years on a capital improvement plan. And we have in place today plans to replace, repair the necessary infrastructure to make sure that, one, the systems don't fail. And we're replacing them as we see fit. We are spending tens of millions of dollars in water and sewer replacement. You drive around this city, you will see that work being done. In fact, right down the road here on Tinkin, they're putting in the new water main lines, and that's an impressive sight to see. But that's what it takes on that level: planning, budgeting, and being ahead of the curve. As far as our infrastructure on local roads and bridges, again, my predecessors on city council dedicated $5 million a year to the local road improvements. We study local roads using a PACER scale, where it be poor, fair, or good. And we continue to move that mark up from poor to fair to good, where a large percentage of our roads have been addressed, have been repaired, and continue to. Investing that type of money in that infrastructure is noticeable. I've been here 34 years, as I've said, and I know 30 years ago driving around, the quality and condition of our roads wasn't as good as it is today. It's noticeable. Although the statistics say that it's getting better, you can feel it when you're out navigating, especially, as I said, being a real estate agent, I'm in and out of a lot of these neighborhoods. The local roads are something that Rochester Hills has planned for. They've dedicated the resources and the monies, and they're making a difference statistically and as far as perception is concerned in the city. So we're doing good work, planning, preparing, and then implementing the solutions.
All right, thank you, David. I'll switch over here to Matt. So infrastructure, budget, how do we address what we need to address and keep everything in line for our citizens?
Right. Well, and I don't have any issue with anything that Dave just said about the current projects that are going on and how the city assesses those projects. It's just, I feel like we've gotten into a problem where some things get into a state of catastrophic failure before we start to address it. And I want to see us be more proactive than we are now. And I recognize that water and sewer drainage is like one of the major expenses on the capital improvement budget expenditure. And so we're seeing, luckily, new methods for replacing water lines and sewer lines and things like that, which lessen the impact on the residents. But we really need to make sure that we're addressing those much more aggressively, because as we've seen in this summer alone, we've had a ridiculous amount of rain. In fact, in the last 24 hours, I think it was raining for all 24 of those hours. And so, you know, it's one of those issues that, as Dave pointed out, that our city's getting older and our infrastructure is crumbling, and we need to do something about that more aggressively. And we're already spending millions and millions and millions of dollars. I think it's like 13% of our capital improvement budget is for water and sewer drainage. And we're just sinking a lot of money into that, and it's necessary, but we need to be more aggressive about it so that we don't have situations crop up in Rochester Hills like there have in other cities with basements flooding, roads flooding, serious erosion problems, things like that. Now, aside from the water and sewer infrastructure, on the road infrastructure, right again, our local roads are having problems. We need to step that up. We need to focus on rejuvenating those city streets, the local streets, the neighborhood streets, and the curbs. But to me, infrastructure means a lot more than just those two things. And we have some really exciting things coming up in the future, I think. Number one, we have the proliferation of autonomous vehicles, which is really exciting. It really is. But the problem is that as a local government, you have to plan for that new technology. Even if you don't plan to use it, you still have to plan for it. And so there's things that we need to think about as a city which haven't been addressed to this point, like making sure we have a budget to repaint our lane lines every year, because that's how these vehicles are going to drive safely down the road, as long as they can detect the lane lines, for instance. And if we let the lane lines get faded, then obviously the safety benefit that those features on your vehicle have become less and less. We should have smart intersections with cameras that can communicate with those autonomous vehicles. Again, not a dime allocated to that in the current budget. And then also we have electric vehicles that are coming up. This is not a big surprise at all. This has been coming, we've known it, and it's just become more and more obvious in the news lately as automakers continue to announce that their future fleets are going to be either 50% electric or pure electric. We have hardly any, I don't even know if we have any electric vehicle charging stations in the city of Rochester Hills. And we are years behind other cities that have been more forward-looking about what the challenges are that they're going to be encountering in the future. And so in the capital improvement plan, they threw in a $250,000 facilities upgrade to install electric vehicle charging stations starting in 2023. Again, we're already years behind on this, and now we're putting it out to 2023. And so we really need to step up. We know it's coming, we know it's an issue, but we also have an opportunity. We can get the revenue as the city for the electric vehicle charging stations. So we have every incentive to try to beat private businesses to putting electric vehicle charging stations into the city of Rochester Hills. And we haven't done it. And we have to, because it's a challenge that we know is coming. Again, even if you know you're not going to drive an electric vehicle, the job of the city council and the city government is to plan for the trends that are coming up. And we haven't done it. And that's what I want to see, is that we invest in the infrastructure that we traditionally know about: water, sewer, roads, but also look to the future, autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, and make sure that the city isn't going to be in a position where they have to make a massive expenditure in the next few years when they don't plan on it, and we can do it incrementally over time.
Well, thank you, Matt, for that. And I'll bounce off another question, and I'll have you address it first, Matt, and then I'm going to go over to David. So with all of these projects that you just spoke about, it takes revenue, and it obviously takes planning. How do you get that revenue into play? Are you thinking of raising taxes, writing grants, doing a multiple of things? It's very costly. So how do you, that's part of the budget question. How do you deal with, raising that revenue?
Right. Well, I think number one, it should have been something that was planned for about 3 or 4 years ago, and that should have been included in the capital improvement plan for this year, or even last year, or the year before that. Because again, the downtown Rochester has an electric vehicle charging station. I think you're familiar with that, Kim.
Yep.
And here we are in Rochester Hills with a much larger population, again, with a lot of people who are employed by the auto industry, and we know how this is going. But as far as funding goes, the city of Rochester Hills has a really unique opportunity right now, because the American Rescue Plan is going to designate $6.1 million to the city of Rochester Hills that it can use in a manner it deems fit. And at this point in the budget process, the city's made no commitments on where that money is going to go or how it's going to be used, which might be appropriate because you don't have to spend it right now. You have a couple of years to spend it. But that's one source of revenue where I would like to see us do some transformational stuff in the city of Rochester Hills. We should use that money to really bring us up to speed, make sure that we're at the cutting edge of technology, make sure that we're not being left behind by other cities that have planned for this. Because again, we are years behind in the city of Rochester Hills. There's no doubt about it. And so we really need to make sure that we seize that opportunity to use that American Rescue Plan dollars to do that stuff, the transformational things in Rochester Hills that could really bring us back up to speed. So I think that's one avenue for it. I think, readjusting some of the budget line items in future years, obviously 2022 might be a little too late. I know the vote on that budget is coming up on Monday, but again, these are the types of things that we need to be thinking about in the future. And frankly, the city hasn't been thinking about it.
All right, thank you, Matt. David, what's your thoughts?
Well, I can assure you that Rochester Hills is not being left behind, that we are a forward-looking, innovative city, and we continue with our limited resources. We do not have unlimited resources. So, we have to pick our battles, pick our projects, and what we plan is essential. And it usually appeals to the majority. Now, if you look at what we're working on and where we're spending our time, money, and resources, that's going to impact the greatest number of residents. When you talk about a minority play, I think there's a different perspective there, is that you don't use the residents' money to appease the minority. So it would be challenging to start taking monies that could be spent elsewhere, limited resources, limited dollars, and using them in an unknown or a variable at this point. We all know the government's been trying to move the electric vehicle market forward and has spent billions and billions of dollars over a very long period of time and has barely moved the needle. So I don't see that this, particularly electric charging stations in the city of Rochester Hills, is a need that we need to address today. We have, in our capital improvement plan, put a placeholder there to look at when and if the need arises to put in place the vehicles and the charging stations necessary to appease our residents. But you think about who's it appeasing. If you're driving around the city, you're driving around 32 square miles, you charge your house, you charge your car at your house, you drive around the city, you go back to home. Are you trying to appease a transient person coming from another community to use your charging station? To what end? Is that a benefit to the residents? So again, there's a lot of complicated issues when you say this particular issue or that particular issue. We continue to try to spend our money on the greater good of the majority of residents. And when you start to invest in the water, the sewer, the roads, that's where we have limited resources. That's where we have limited money. And that's where we would choose to spend our time. Not necessarily in the outliers, but where the majority has the need. Like Innovation Hills, where we have spent monies necessary to provide an amenity that residents will enjoy for years to come. I don't think we're quite there yet with other outliers that we've talked about.
All right, well, thank you very much. I know anyone that runs for city council, serves on city council, it's a big job, and we appreciate all the efforts on both sides. It's not easy, it's complicated. So with that complication, I know many businesses and cities do an exercise called SWOT, which is S stands for your strength, W stands for the weakness, O stands for opportunity, and T stands for threat. So let's take just a moment to think about what Rochester Hills' biggest strength is, opportunity is, their biggest threat is, and their biggest weakness. Matt, do you have some thoughts on what those capabilities or attributes are for Rochester Hills?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, the strengths, I mean, I think we have a great population of residents. Again, growing up here, I have a lot of friends that are still here and that have chosen to come back to the city of Rochester Hills. So the people here are really our strength. And they're, according to the data, you know, a very educated workforce. You know, a lot of retirees have decided to stay in Rochester Hills. People like me who graduated high school here have decided to come back and invest in Rochester Hills, buy homes here, raise their own families here. And so Rochester Hills over the years has really instilled that sense of you know, wanting to stay and wanting to come back and be a part of the community. You know, weaknesses, like I said earlier, overdevelopment. You know, what makes Rochester Hills so unique is that we have our rolling wooded hills, and we continue to see those being eroded every single day. And we, you know, some people say maybe it's too late to stop the development, stop overdevelopment, but we're at a turning point. We need to do something now because we only have a finite amount of natural priority 1 land left in the city. And so that really, to me, is a huge weakness in the city. And again, I just want to make something very clear. I'm not against development. I'm against overdevelopment. And I'm not against redevelopment. I'm against development that erodes our green spaces, that makes Rochester Hills so unique. Now, listen, we have an opportunity here. The opportunity is that back in 2005, the voters passed a $10 million millage that was appropriated specifically for the purpose of acquiring priority 1 natural area land for green space. And in the last 5 years, the city hasn't spent a dime on acquiring new property to preserve it as green space. And look, I understand, if you own a piece of property here, you have property rights and you can build on your land within the confines of our zoning ordinances and our zoning designations. But when you have a millage that's been voted on in 2005 and that has been vastly underutilized, there's millions and millions and millions of dollars still left in this fund to purchase green space so that we don't fall victim to this overdevelopment of our city. We have a real opportunity here. Let's use that money, buy as much land as we can. It's kind of counterintuitive in a sense, because this is one of those millages that, you know, in the city government, you want to stretch your dollars out for as long as you possibly can time-wise, right? You don't want to burn through it too quickly. This is one millage where you actually want to spend it as quickly as possible because you have every interest in trying to acquire as much of that natural priority 1 area land as you possibly can, as quickly as possible, so that you can preserve it for generations to come, so that every square inch of our city isn't just developed by some new development. And so that's our opportunity, is to use that money to make sure we're preserving our city. We don't have to fill the city up to the brim before the developers go on to the next city and fill that city up to the brim and then move on to the next one. We can decide as citizens, as the residents, that we want to maintain the character of our community. We want to have that rolling hill, tree-lined character. And to do that, we need to purchase that property using the money that's already there and hasn't been used at all. And so one of the threats is that we're going to continue to let developers come in here and erode our green spaces that makes the city unique. And again, I'm not against all development. I'm against overdevelopment. And so that's the biggest threat I see to our city.
All right, thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
David?
Thank you, Kim.
How about you?
Yeah, an easy one for us is the strength. And I talked about being a real estate agent. I deal with the residents and I understand why they choose Rochester Hills over other cities, what they like and dislike. And I'll tell you what they like is the amenities that we have to offer, the quality of life here. If you think about how unique we are in Rochester Hills with our parks and our paths and our trails, we are unique in that respect. The Paint Creek, the Clinton River, we have amenities in our parks, Borden and Bloomer and Spencer and our newest one, Innovation Hills. I don't know if you've been over there, but Innovation Hills is quite the sight to see. It is an amazing investment in our community and our residents love it. of all ages. The grandparents are taking the grandkids, the parents are taking the kids. It's a beautiful thing to invest in that type of 80 some odd acres over there. It's a lot of green space that we've, preserved and developed and allowed the residents to use it. So a strength is our amenities, parks, paths, trails, a lifestyle that we create for our residents. The weakness is I can't think of an obvious weakness. We are firing in all cylinders in Rochester Hills. Things are going well. People are happy. Residents are safe. Incomes are up. We have a healthy business climate. We do have a healthy environment, which is going to attract developers. There's no question about it. But you don't want the alternative. If you had a depressed economy and no developer wanted to come, then your property values would go down and you wouldn't be happy. So it's a good problem to have. But maintaining it and controlling it is limited. You can only do so much with the available space. As again, a real estate agent knows, we are in a seller's market. And anybody with a parcel of land right now thinks that there's oil in their backyard. They will be asking a premium for it. I don't think it's in the best interest of our residents to overpay for a parcel of land because according to the master plan, there are certain things that you can develop on this property. For us to go in and overpay for a parcel of land to protect it from developers probably isn't in the best interest of our residents and probably isn't a good use of our monies. There are parcels of land that we are evaluating continuously. And if the owner, the seller, comes to a reasonable price, then we are willing to pay a reasonable amount. But the city has no intention of overpaying exponentially for some of these parcels that these sellers think they have. There are some undevelopable, wetlands, lowlands, things that are less desirable that we always consider. So we have and will continue to navigate those areas. So opportunity, yes, but within reason, not overpaying. And then the threats, probably, I can't think of an obvious threat either right now that we would have to address that we're not already addressing. And threat's a strong word. Like I said, Rochester Hills has an amazing administration, the directors, the departments, the staff. They are award-winning organizations that are doing the residents a service far beyond their known abilities in that we are in a good position. The current city council is working together collectively, albeit we don't always agree. We have a healthy debate. We agree to disagree, and we move forward in the greater good of the community and the residents. That's a healthy environment. Not all municipalities share that synergy. And then the relationship that we have with administration. I believe that it's a healthy dialogue so that we can work together for the benefit of our community. So things are going well in Rochester Hills. We have strengths, we have opportunities. I wouldn't say we had many weaknesses or threats. Thanks.
Okay, so at this point, we have about 10 minutes left. So I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to try to kind of just wrap up what your thoughts are. Matt, we'll start with you. What's your lasting impression that you would like to leave with your audience?
Sure. Well, again, Kim, thank you very much for moderating this discussion. I think it's actually been very informative for all the voters, and it really does have a lot of value. I know I've talked to David before that growing up in Rochester Hills, I started watching city council meetings when I was like 12 years old and on the 13-inch TV in my bedroom. And so I was probably the only 12-year-old that was following city council at that point. It's pretty safe to say. But, I do find that these candidate forums are very valuable, and I really appreciate what you've done and what the League of Women Voters does year in, year out, every single election. It's very important to have a fully informed electorate so that we can all participate in democracy meaningfully and understand that a lot of the decisions that impact your everyday life come at the local level. And so this is why this race in particular is very important. Because again, like I said earlier, we are at a turning point in the city where we need to decide what our priorities are as residents. Are we going to continue to allow every single square inch of the city be developed and then have all the consequences of that overdevelopment not be addressed? or the only way that we're going to address it is by continuing to widen roads and continuing to have population density problems and congestion and traffic issues and deer crash issues. So we're at a turning point here. We need to decide as residents, and this is what you're voting on. Are you going to vote that you want to keep the city and maintain its character, keep that rolling wooded hill scenery that we have in the city of Rochester Hills? Or are we going to continue to allow developers to come in here and have a free-for-all with our natural one priority land? I don't think we should. The priorities of the city are very important, and we need to make sure that we as citizens know what we're voting for. You know, currently there is a huge disparity in what our priority is. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 536 acres of industrial parks versus 125 or 127 acres of natural priority one area land that's been preserved as green space. And we're having a continuous problem with deer crashes. Last year alone, 154 deer crashes in Rochester Hills. The numbers are continuing to climb, and we need to do something to address it. But we can't keep letting developers come in and then create the problems that go unaddressed. And so if I leave you with anything today, is that I want you to understand that my care for the community and my care for the city of Rochester Hills and the future of Rochester Hills is coming from someone who grew up here. I have very fond memories of my childhood here, going to school here, going to college here, and now raising my own family here. And I want to make sure that we're making sure that Rochester Hills is a great place to live for generations to come. And it's not going to be that great if, again, we look like every other city that has built out to the brim. And so, again, I appreciate the time that you've afforded me to give an opportunity to talk directly to the voters. This is an important race. And I want to ask you directly for your vote on November 2nd. And I promise to you that I work extremely hard to keep the interests of the residents of Rochester Hills at the forefront of all decisions. Thank you, Kim.
All right, thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. David.
Thank you, Kim. I think just to recap what we've talked about here today is that you're looking for the right experience and the right candidate. And I think I bring that to bear. If you look at my body of work, my investment in this community, I've lived here for 34 years. I tell people that for the first 20 years, I don't know that I lived here as much as I have for the last 15 years, but about 15 years ago, I got involved. I started volunteering in this community. I started giving back to this community and learning all the things and all the amenities that this community had to offer. I got involved with the Chamber of Commerce. I got involved with the Clinton River Watershed, the foundation. I'm a Rochester Rotarian. All these philanthropic pursuits allowed me to really start to appreciate this community. And I tell people that maybe for the first 20 years, I just commuted to and from work and just lived in this community. But for the last 15 years, with that community involvement, getting connected, making a contribution, I really feel like I live in this community. So with that investment in the community, my time, my service, I think that will resonate with the voters to say, this guy's connected, this guy's involved. And all the organizations that I participate in, from the OPC to the Paint Creek Trailways Commission, the Rochester Rotary, the Chamber of Commerce, get involved, make a connection, make a contribution. It does make a difference. It makes a difference in my life, and it makes a difference in this community's life. I think I tell people there's a selfish component and a selfless component. I get as much out of it as I put into it. So from that respect, I really feel that I'm connected to this community and the residents. From a real estate perspective, we've talked about that. I deal with the residents every day. That's my job. I've got the greatest product in the world to provide. I have Rochester Hills to sell, which is a wonderful way to invite new neighbors into our community, show them our amenities, show them our community, and welcome them as new neighbors. I know what they like and they dislike about the community. So it uniquely gives me that knowledge base to work with the residents, know what they like and the dislike. And then, as a matter of course, I am in and out of every neighborhood in this community. I see the local roads, I see the infrastructure, I have firsthand knowledge. That is a unique skill set that I bring. So from a professional perspective and a volunteer perspective, that combination really affords me a unique set of skills to provide that information to the residents and work on their behalf. So on behalf of the residents, I think we have an educated population. They will do their homework. They will look at the difference between the candidates. And I think they will agree that having that experience, having that connection, having that tenure in the community will be the differentiating factor as to why they would choose David Walker for their city council member at large come November 2nd or before. Absentee ballots are going out today, Thursday. So hopefully you'll see those in their mailbox soon. So again, thank you. Appreciate the time. Appreciate Kim and the League of Women Voters. And I would hope to honor with my service. Thank you.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you, Matt, so much. You're right. And it really is an important vote, even though there's not a lot on the ballot. It really affects us personally. So I would suggest anyone to, really get out there and vote. Absentee ballots are going out today. So it is important to cast that vote, even in a smaller election. And I really do appreciate your care and your time and all the efforts that you've come to really educate yourself about your community and serving it. So thank you so much. And the conclusion of this program, the League really appreciates your participation and would also like to thank the City of Rochester Hills for providing this televising this forum. And the program will be rebroadcast on the WOW channel, Channel 10, Comcast Channel 20, and A&T Channel 99 several times before the election. It will also be available on the League and City's website, along with YouTube. So the city's website, the League of Women Voters website is lwvoa.org, or you also can see it on the website of vote411.org. So the League of Women Voters also provides a voter's guide for the 2001 election. So you can get that available at the website as well. Please remember to vote Tuesday, November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you.